Evening, all. How's it going? Welcome to another Lockdown Live chat. Another doom-laden week of Lockdown Live chats, our last of the month. It's been an interesting one. As usual, joined with my awesome co-host in unpacking this expansive subgenre, Mr. Alec Larson of Dracona Media. How's it going, man?
Oh, it's all good. Not really much to say other than it's a little cold at the moment, but it's not as cold as last week, so it's getting better, I guess.
Oh, yeah, this has been a very up to type of topic, talking about doom metal in the icy cold period of the winter here. So yeah, I guess as we kind of wrap up this whole month's worth of chats, we thought who would be better or best, should we say, actually, in unpacking the more obscure symphonic, funeral, and death doom subgenres. So you guys might know him, oh God, compared to Alec, who might have met his match on the number of projects with our guest today. You guys might know him, though, more appropriately as good old Leon Kemp of Portraits of Flesh. Welcome, man. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm happy we could kind of get this to work. And I mean, obviously, somebody that's dabbled a bit in the whole symphonic doom side, you should add some interesting opinions on the topic. But yeah, I guess let's kind of kick this off. It's kind of a touchy topic from the get-go, but we always kick off our lockdown chats at the beginning of lockdown. Obviously, in the case of Portraits and virtually all of your projects, a lot of momentum going with everything, and then kind of nothing, and the world shut down during the pandemic pretty much. So 19 months later, how things been going for you? How things in the camps, so to speak?
Well, I would say it's quite easy to be negative about this current scenario we've found ourselves in. But it's a good time to reflect and to get back to the drawing board and to refine, personal skill on the stuff and to get back, onto the development. Sometimes when it gets into the live circuit, it can take a step backwards. We just kind of machine through the motions of just playing the gigs, so this is a good time to just clean up the playing and be re-inspired as well. And I think the isolation did wonders for the inspiration for some doom bands as well. So it's got a good touch to it as well. I won't lie.
Yeah, it's definitely been a common trait around everybody in doom, is that the isolation, it's not all that bad, not having to deal with people as much. It's not a bad thing, but obviously the lack of performance, which obviously comes into it, that's kind of a kick in the nuts for everybody in the entertainment industry. So yeah, anyway.
Yeah, so I'm really glad that we're getting to have this conversation because I've talked to Alan quite a lot about the music that he's involved in, and obviously Portraits of Flesh is one of those projects. And the first time he mentioned the doom band that he's in, I was confused. So maybe let's talk about how you guys classify Portraits of Flesh exactly. Like, what sort of, if you were to give it a label, how would you label Portraits from your own perspective?
Well, for us, it's more of a hybrid band of the amount of different influences and styles. So I think calling it a doom metal band was a little, well, let's say a bit easy, because that was the initial idea. My brother, Charles and Philbury, they were the first ones to instigate the idea of forming a doom band from the get-go. And when they told me about the idea, I was like, doom, really, doom, we're gonna do a doom band, So in the beginning, I wasn't absolutely thrilled of the idea because I associated as a stigma. It has to be slow, it has to be laid up. We need to have 20-minute tracks and so. And initially we started off like that, where we, kept to the slower pace as we got into the tracks. But I would say halfway through the album, it readapted and we brought in some foreign styles and influences. And it's a bit more liberating to have that and not to be bound just by a single influence that, you feel you have to sit in that mold, The band has to sound right. We needed, the logo must fit the mold, and it can feel a little contrived, but I think it's more rewarding at the end of the day if you do push, even if one does fail, it doesn't matter. But having inspiration in the process, it helps a lot and it keeps it alive. So there's always next time where you feel we've built something that could last. We can top it next time. We can push it even further. Like, we don't know where it's going to go, and being bound by, let's say, 3-4 bands as a main source of inspiration, it's I feel you want to leave your inspiration behind after a while. You don't want to just listen to the band, be like, oh, that guy listens to this band, that band. And I think that's where the real challenge lies as well. And it's inspiring to work in that environment when it becomes that.
Awesome.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, you guys have had this innate ability of being able to blend so many genres within it. Like you say, just pigeonholing it within the category of doom would just be, it's too objective. So yeah, I mean, I guess, with you obviously like being approached the whole idea of a doom band and stuff, you obviously had a couple of your own personal influences and bands that would have grabbed your ear in the earlier days. So I mean, I guess, yeah, keeping it simple, like in terms of the tropes of or the characteristics of doom metal, for people that might not know, what would you say, like, what are the key characteristics that make doom metal, especially like the death doom and the funeral doom?
I would say the feel of desolation and the loneliness of it, and also I think the thing about doom is it's not as how can I say, contrived. Lots of death metal, for instance, you'll have the pentagram on the cover, you'll have the ghost in the middle. It has to put off on a front sometimes of it. It has to look evil, so the look does it for it. But this is, you really get to soundscape in the feel of things, and without having all those negative connotations, you can just sit with your guitar and a keyboard layer, and you can conjure this, huge feel on it. So it's quite a alluring, way to go about it. It's really inspiring, I feel. As it comes by bands and stuff, I can name a few. I would say Opeth was a big influence for me, especially their earlier works. Dark Fortress is a favorite of mine. Meshuggah has always been a huge influence coming from the drumming side. But now we want to bring out bands that aren't normally associated with doom metal and draw from that inspiration as well. And I think that can be a bit refreshing. Personally, I would say just on the drumming side of things, I wanted to capture a more raw feel of a kit. It has to be played. I don't want it quantized. I want it. So that's the influence that I would attribute to the first 2 Slipknot albums, Demanufacture, Puritanical, well, that demo album, Puritanical, I've lost the name there. But, yeah. It's I want to feel when the blast beat gets played, the drummer is on the edge. He's about to lose it. So it has that ferocity about it, where sometimes you can feel that like almost drones. It's too slick. So it's to break those small little points as well. And it's not necessarily the band inspired, but also from the production side. The Rival from Hypocrisy, a brilliant album as well that explores those areas.
Cool. So when we started talking, you mentioned that like sort of a little bit of the back history of the formation of Portraits of Flesh and your brother and Fulbray saying they wanted to start a doom band, and you're like, really, like doom, because maybe it's not your most favorite genre. Are there any bands that you've come to love since getting involved in doom, sort of like doom adjacent music? Like, have you, are there any doom or death doom bands that you started to like?
Well, personally, I must say, My Dying Bride has always been a big favorite of mine, even from back then. I just haven't considered the idea of playing in a doom band at that given point in time. My Dying Bride, I would say, is my ultimate favorite band in that area. Sano and Godflesh, another one. Well, two. There's some type of negatives that have a very doom-laden vibe as well. Maybe on the prettier side of things, but Alice in Chains. I'm a big Jerry Cantrell fan, especially on the guitar. So I think those moods do seep in from there. And also in the gothic nature of things, where Thornbury also has a lot of influence, and myself. There's lots of stuff in common between the two genres. They do cross over, so it does help.
Cool.
Yeah, it's actually, it's funny that you mentioned that, because it kind of segues nice into the question that I kind of had. We recently spoke to Biggie and Malcolm of the League of Doom, and they were basically telling us, again, another crew that got kicked in the nuts by this whole pandemic, but they had a nice wild set of events coming up. One of the events that was coming up was going to feature none other than Portraits of Flesh down here in Cape Town. Now, you guys have been performing a while. You know, we're not going to go mark the ages or something, but you've done your time. But I think kind of a little bit of a neutral perspective in your eyes, being able to perform across the country. Is there a different reaction that you guys get when you perform in certain places, like if you perform in your hometown as opposed to Cape Town? Yeah.
Well, Cape Town was really an absolute highlight for us. We got a very warm reception down there. And I could tell the guys really enjoyed what we did. And, you know, it was actually quite rewarding to see that, where I can find sometimes a reception in Joburg. It's not always the same. And I think it's down to, there's such a frequency of bands that, you know, it's just, you know, whoever gets to play this weekend, you know. But also I feel there's sometimes an outsider connotation to stuff as well. You have to be buddies with promoters and organizers, and you got to, you know, and maybe because we are also not always upfront, always all over, you know, we keep to ourselves, and it's not really on purpose. I think it's also how we've grown up with metal as such. I associate it as an outsider thing, so that's how I, you know, came to know it, and not really the jovial beer drinking vibe. So that it could be something about that. But also when we plotted our gigs up in Joburg and Pretoria, it wasn't necessarily through organizers. We would just plan them ourselves randomly in various places, and well, hope for the best, really.
Interesting. I'm curious. In kind of conjunction with what you were saying, do you guys kind of adjust your set lists in accordance to the gigs that you're playing at? Like, did you guys have a different set list in mind when you played at Metal for Africa, for example, as opposed to, you know, maybe Joburg 3 weeks before that?
We did shuffle it up. When we went down to Cape Town, we tried to keep it a little bit on the heavier side than what we would normally do. We taken out some of the lighter songs. We rather kept it heavy, and normally something we would like, or what we like to do in the set, is just to end it off with a cover or so. So we played Jimmy Borges' Puritania down there, and went really well. So that it's just nice to give people, you know, a song that they recognize, and then the broader spectrum, just like top it off on a lighter note. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a doom band track or anything. It's just that little extra just on the end where they don't normally expect it, just for fun, really.
Speaking as somebody that actually saw that performance, I was quite blown away. I know a lot of people were, because you kind of were slotted in between two other bands, completely different genres. Like the one was basically like a more like glam rocky type vibe, and the other one was basically like thrash. So you guys were like slotted right there in the middle, and yeah, definitely made an impact. Do you think you would have changed up the set list once again to obviously be performing for League of Doom? Would you have gone for something a little bit more the slower mid-tempo and slower beat tracks from the album?
I definitely think so. I think playing for the broader audience, maybe like last time, it's easier to keep people's attention, like, upping the tempo a little bit and playing those numbers. But yeah, I think we will reconsider that, bringing the softer touch next time. I think we'll scan the room and analyze it a little bit. So yeah, we'll read the folks and be like, oh, maybe not the ballad for this one. If we see the Black Label and the jumping going, we'll bring the heavier stuff. So,
awesome. You're obviously involved in a ton of projects. So too many to actually just like name off the top of my head, but obviously they are quite stylistically different, with like in Misery focusing on like the industrial side of things. You obviously play drums for Spectral Realm, which is South Africa's premier black metal band, well, symphonic black metal band. And then Portraits of Flesh being like a slower, more down-tempo, symphonic, deathy, black metal, doomy hybrid. My question is like sort of multifaceted, in the sense that in Portraits, I think you're accredited to playing a lot more instruments, just like everyone else is. So like Alan is credited to playing guitars and bass. You were credited for drums and guitars. Charles also got some guitar and bass credits. So I'm just interested how you guys decided on your like live lineup and who would play what when you play live as Portraits.
I think when we initially did the album, it came down to the songwriting process of it all. And myself and my brother, I think due to us being like band leaders in our own projects, we've gotten accustomed to writing tracks by ourselves, musically, and then the layout of it will, instead of trying to get everybody on the same page and rehearsing the tracks, we would rather just come in and lay down all the parts and then have everybody look at it and refine them a bit or so. So it's a team effort in that aspect. But in the initial writing phase, it's very improvisational. So there is no real structural form to it. When it came to the live scenario, naturally drums are my strongest instrument that I feel most comfortable with. And I felt we went to our national instruments, we just fall into place. So there was no disagreement there really at all. So not to say we didn't really think it through, just that's how it plotted out.
Cool. And I noticed live, I don't think you guys play with a bassist, right? Is that part of the bass tracks, part of all the extra symphonics? And is that how you guys perform live? Is you included in that like the orchestral layer? Or
yeah, the bass and the orchestral and sparse samples that we use, they'll have on the backtrack and the click, and then we'll just do it like that. So it's the two guitars, vocalist, and the drum kit, then the rest put like that. Maybe it will change, who knows? But it feels good for us at this point in time. So I think if we had a bassist at the time, we'd probably have a bassist on stage. But we rather work as a smaller unit and get the most sound out of it. I feel it's a bit harder getting stuff done with more members that let's say, just play bass. Maybe if it's a bassist that adds a bit on the vocals and a bit of keyboards, or can juggle around a bit, maybe that would make sense. But otherwise, we keep it close enough for now. We probably consider expanding later point, but I suppose it's the mobile constraints as well. It's easier to put 4 guys on the plane, fly down, than have the whole slip knot. You don't have the budget.
100%. Yeah, no, definitely.
Well, I definitely think you guys have there's a really good organic chemistry when you guys perform live. You can tell that you guys are in sync, and you guys are able to kind of add a slight little bit of improvisation even within the live sets, so that it doesn't sound audibly as tight as what it would be on the record, but with those little nuances. And I think you only get that from being able to perform with guys like that for so long. You get into a rhythm. But I'm kind of curious, from a production standpoint now, obviously, like Alex said, number of projects will include Horrid also, just because, got to mention the death metal, we have to. But in terms of the writing process, how long is it? Just off the ball, how long is the writing process with writing with portraits versus running for your own tracks on your own? How long is the process usually for these? The first?
Surprisingly, not that long at all, really. It's I would give the credit to the improvisational aspect of it. Just sitting down and picking up a guitar and just streaming freely, that would be the easiest. For instance, I wouldn't use Guitar Pro and take the time and lay it out and plot it out, really. It's the guitar recording, the drumming happens at the same time. We sit down now, so I have no idea if the idea is going to work right now. It's just play and see what happens. So I feel it's a way to also surprise yourself musically. That I feel that's a natural way for us. I did it where I tried tablature back in the day, but I felt I was kind of stuck. I couldn't get everything out that seemed. So my brother as well, in his writing, it's very similar. So production wise, I feel if having a home studio and where we can work on a daily or in a daily setting almost, you can refine it a lot more. There's more patience. It doesn't have to be ready tomorrow. I can do 16 versions and no one would know. So it will only come out later. So the refining process behind that, it helps a lot as well. I've never been at ease going to studio spinning X amount of, and just not nailing it, just not getting exactly what the vision is. I'd rather not do it at all then. It has to get to where it has to be. Otherwise, I felt it was just not worth it at all. So it has to take time. We have to hone it in, and it has to be cohesive, the whole album from the beginning to the end. And I find that blend is sometimes harder to get out, especially when one song is a gothic waltz, ballady type of track, and the next one is a death metal piece with some technical bits in between. Blending those aspects on the same album can be a bit of a challenge. So I feel that it takes more time in that sense.
Awesome. You mentioned almost like an unstructured ad hoc approach to writing, which is very opposite to myself. I sit behind Guitar Pro all the time. That's awesome. But my motivation is behind sitting behind Guitar Pro is I really like using it for orchestration. So like writing all the different layers of the symphonic tracks, right? So I was wondering, do you guys whip out the MIDI keyboard when you're doing the orchestration, or is it slightly less? Like, how do you guys go about that? Like in your writing process?
We don't incorporate the Guitar Pro for that, but yeah, we have our MIDI keyboard, and we'll tuck it in there and then Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Cool.
Now that I think about it. It also, I think it begins with the guitars and the drum layers, and also we don't want to dress up too much of the melodies right from the get-go. We just pull it all up. You know, it can be a very poor call for a vocalist, especially singing melodic parts that you're going to crash into the instruments as you go. So it's easier to bring that stuff into the flow after the vocals has been done. In Portraits of Flesh, we have it's more harsher vocals that we have. So the melodic elements, it can really be enhanced by quite a bit versus perhaps my In Misery project that I've got. I have to trim the melody between the vocal lines and the synth layers and that very finely. Otherwise, you might not end up with the ideal melody for the vocal line, which is supposed to be the main focus. So I think that balancing act is a good decision to take early or not, and not to overdress too early in the process.
Awesome. I think we reaching the end of our talk. Before we get into the plugging thing, I always ask as a fellow guitarist, what tuning do you guys use for Portraits of Flesh in general?
Well, all our projects are in drop C currently.
Oh, cool.
Drop C has been from the start. Can't say why drop C, it just happened. Also, same as everything else, it just happened.
Awesome.
I think it's also when you play it and it's easy to half through it. You're having the bar chord and getting a full extension out of the notes. So I've been drawn to that and I've stuck with it.
Cool.
So as my brother, and I don't think it will change anytime soon. Maybe we'll bring in the 7-string later a bit more. I have to speculate.
Awesome. Well, it has been really great talking to you. I think we're at the point that we need to wrap this up before the money hungry people at Zoom kick us off. But it's been really great. Is there anything you want to plug, any music that's coming out soonish that you'd like to talk about?
We just released a single with Portraits of Flesh called Faustian Lament, and we put that out on Bandcamp on Monday.
Awesome.
Please check it out, and hope you guys enjoy the dire tone of it.
Awesome.
Can't wait. Well, Leon, again, thank you so much for joining us. We definitely need to have you back. We'll be deep diving this genre, no doubt, again. We'll see what happens in the next year or so in terms of this whole pandemic and the doom metal scene in SA. But thank you for coming by, shedding a little bit of light, giving a few little suggestions for peeps that might be interested in dipping into the genre. And just keep on shredding and blasting all those projects, and we'll keep on listening, man. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. It's nice to know that people find our blend appealing. So it's heartwarming in this cold weather. And shout out to the League of Doom guys. Thanks for the mention. So we'll see. We hope to see them very soon in the cave. One of these days.
Damn right. Well, Alec, what do you say? We're done for another week, a month of doom. What do you say?
I feel doom me.
I don't think I'm going to say that word for the rest of the year. I swear to God, I'm over it. Man, what a fun month. Leon, thanks again for joining us. Thank you to everybody that tuned in. We'll be back same time, same place on the interweb. From next month, we're dipping into new bands that we don't even know, but we're going to find out more about them as the weeks go ahead. So stay tuned for that. Like, share, and subscribe because that helps. And keep that social distancing going, and we will see you next week. Later, y'all.